Hello, and thank you for joining us today for a very special edition of Armi. We have a very great guest with us, actually a friend of the Andrew Womack Ministries, a board member of Truth and Liberty. But just before I announce our special guest and talk about Dr. Lance Wallnau, I just want to thank my lovely wife, Karen Conrad Metcalf, for being here.
Thanks
Thank you,
for
Karen.
having me.
So this is a special day because currently they have, both of them are on the board of Truth and Liberty. They have just finished a board meeting this morning with exciting details about what's happening throughout the ministry. And you're going to learn more about it, but essentially the ministry is expanding and there's so many great opportunities. And we wanted to bring Dr. Lance Wallnau in to talk about what is happening currently in the United States, especially around the Courage Tour that he's involved in. And Dr. Lance, I'd just like to thank you for taking time with us, and please tell us about this exciting Courage Tour. Karen and I have been watching. It's amazing. We've loved it. And tell us what's happening.
Well, you know, I'm part of the Army organization here, and I'm thinking, how are Christians, particularly those who have committed themselves to ministry, how are they able to leverage their influence the most in a critical time like this? People come up to me a lot and they say, what can I do? What can I do? It's a sad statement that we have a populist movement of concerned, enlightened citizens that really don't know what to do other than vote or just, share texts with each other. But there's multiple of things that can be done. And so I actually sat back and to answer the question, I said, I myself am wondering, what can I do? And it started me listening to information. The first thing I found out is that in a period like this, there's like 7 swing states that we look at that are called the battleground states. Well, spiritually, that means they're battlegrounds in the spirit because there's forces vying for what direction they go in. So that got my attention. And the second part is there's 3,143 counties in the United States, but only 19 of those 3,000 will determine the future of the republic. And whatever happens this year will determine the future clearly probably for the next 10 to 15 years. It's going to be a trajectory. So I said, man, where are those counties? They're in those 7 states. So I wanted to find those counties. Then the next question is, well, what can I do? There again, now you got information, but you're still saying, well, what can I do? And I knew that Mario Murillo and I worked together. We had a lot of success last year doing a thing called Fire and Glory, which was a lot of fun. But what we would do is he would do revival in the evenings and preach the gospel and pray for the sick. And we really have miracles. We have miracles kind of like similar what Andrew would have. It's testimonies. We have movies now of documented miracles that we're coming out with. So the church is experiencing revival of signs and wonders. During the daytime, though, I would do the Reformation. He does revival. Reformation is where, you could have a move of God with salvation and still lose the country. So you want to have a Reformation that saves the institutions. So I started the daytime meetings. And so Dave and Karen, what we found out is if we do the daytime meetings and tie it into the evening, then we have a kind of an interesting alchemy. Reformation and revival, I think, produces awakening. Because awakening is larger than just a revival, and it's got more spirituality than a reformation. So we started doing that. And the daytime is to offer all of the activist activities. So we bring people up on the platform that are very seldom known. And they share what they do, whether it's voter integrity or we have one guy discovered who said, hey, we know exactly who the people are in those counties that need to vote, that don't vote, that will vote their values, but they just are under an oppression. Those areas, they just feel like it doesn't make a difference. What if I gave you their name and address, and you didn't even live in that state, but you wrote them a letter? I'll pay for the postage. So here's a guy that has donors that will pay for letter writing to pray over a letter and send it to someone. And I started listing these strategies out and realized you don't have to be in those 7 states to affect the 7 states. You could be anywhere. So we're really prioritizing how to be informed and what you can do that's practical, that can reach out and have an impact on what takes place within an election cycle. And it's all legitimate, it's all legitimate 501c3 activity because it's engagement and training. So churches are always worried about, well, how can I go? This stuff is all within the parameter of citizen engagement.
That is so good.
That's really important. And Karen, just coming out of the board meeting, I know you've got a couple relevant questions that will help our viewers right now. Sure. But one of the things I'd like to just mention briefly, when we talk about the Courage Tour, this is so important because what you're doing is you're actually giving courage that there is something that we can do as individuals to make a difference. And to give a brief context, not to really go there a lot, but it's important. You spoke early on, back when Trump was running for president the first time, and you gave a prophetic word that he is going to be a president, and the Cyrus. And what happened in that word actually released courage, and there were people that just took courage and they started to do something. So I think it's a little similar in this cycle where you're actually putting courage out there in the atmosphere for people to identify what are the practical hands-on things that I can do to just get involved to help this move along, because there is a warfare part. But I know you've got some great observations just coming from your meeting. Karen, what's your thoughts for what Dr. Lance is doing?
Well, I love what you're doing, Lance, because it is like you're so bold out there. And I think bringing the ministry along with this practical or even the political is something that people are like, hey, what's going on? So I know just talking to a lot of ministers and pastors, they know that something is going on with this country that they want to be a part of, but it's almost been like they're bullied, by the enemy, through voices and people like, hey, if you're vocal, you're going to lose your 501c3, or you could lose half your congregation or half the people. So how did you bring this together so boldly, and then maybe even encourage people with the increase that comes with us actually taking a stand?
Well, first of all, and what you said is so interesting, because pastors have been intimidated by a lie. And the worst thing in the world is to stand before Jesus and find out that you were conscientiously trying to stay out of trouble, but you lack the discerning and the courage to pierce through a lie you were told. So if the devil can just lie to you, he can immobilize you. And the reality is, I work on a group with lawyers, and the lawyers are all Supreme Court lawyers. They're the Kelly Shackelfords, they're these guys. And they educate me. And so they're saying, no. As a matter of fact, you have more liberties right now than you've ever had before. They're winning cases in the Supreme Court. Part of the awakening is we've had 4 or 5 key cases that have all come down on the side of religious liberty and the freedom of religion. So the pushback in terms of the actual cases is on our side, but we're not aware of it. So for instance, there's a statute called the Lemon Statute. You remember when you couldn't put a 10 Commandments up in a courtroom or in a classroom, or you couldn't bring your Bible into work, and you couldn't put a manger scene on the county courthouse or on. All that was struck down. There were 2,000 applications of the Lemon Law that struck down the expression of religion in a public place if it had anything to do with anything outside of a church, like the civic government. Well, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh basically pushed the issue in discussing it in cases that were up there, and they said, it seems to me with the Coach Kennedy case, a coach who we're going to acknowledge here tonight, who chose to just pray, and he loses his job because he decided to, I mean, you've got people that are, I hate to say it, don't be controversial, but you've got cabinet members right now who are homosexual, whose homosexual spouse goes into classrooms and teaches children to recite a homosexual pledge of allegiance, LGBT pledge. So they're doing that. But here's a Catholic, or here's a coach who isn't even allowed to drop a knee and deliver a silent prayer after a game. Lose your job. But that case, when that comes up, the Supreme Court meets and they go, actually, it's a bigger case than just this. It's the Lemon Law, isn't it? And they're talking to each other. And if we're really going to deal with this little issue, we probably have to go back to the precedent that set up this intimidation. Now, I'm not talking about the Johnson Amendment now. I'm talking about a whole slew of these things. All the statues that came down, the crosses that have come down, the Antifa disfiguring stuff, right? So they came up with the conclusion that the Lemon Law was obsolete. It was too broad and could not be enforced because government's everywhere. So how are you going to possibly separate the two? Therefore, struck it down. Now you have 2,000 applications of the Lemon Law were uprooted in one decision. You don't know that, do you? the average Christian doesn't know. They don't know they could put the 10 Commandments up in the classroom. They don't know they could bring a Bible into work. They didn't know you could put a manger on, because these are all the freedoms we have that we're not aware that we got. And the reason why I'm giving that long answer is it goes right to the heart of this fear. These guys told me, you don't have any problem teaching your people about how to vote and what to vote for. If you don't endorse a specific named candidate, go right up to that line, and your people understand what to do. So, for instance, you will see people are polarized over personalities, because the media and the demonic realm will do that. I don't care who is at the top of a conservative ticket. If it was DeSantis right now, he would be the next thing to Dracula. You would see him getting, you would see the Nixon treatment on him.
Right.
Because Nixon didn't have a real good person. It would be, you have these brooding comedians, and they'd have him looking like Boris Karloff, and they'd be doing things when he's having a press conference. I mean, that's how they would treat him. With Trump, they do a different shtick. But they will smear and vilify into evil, intolerant, puritanical, punishing evil father to stir up the rebellion in the country. They'll do that with whoever you've got. So therefore, the preacher, you never talk about the personality. What you do is you say, we never vote personality because it's not biblical. You want to vote for the pretty face? Really? Is that your values? What you want to do is you want to look at what your principles are regarding life, regarding marriage, regarding debt, regarding lawful or illegal immigration, regarding the responsibility to take care of the next generation, and opening up the debt and opening up the borders is destroying your children's future. They're going to be a slave to the system. They'll never own a house. So you start to talk about principles. Out of principles come the policies. What policies? And out of that comes a platform. Out of a platform comes a person. And you teach your people, these are the biblical priorities, and get beyond same-sex marriage and abortion. We had two fixations. We have to hit all the issues. There's a lot out there. And I'm telling you, you guys can do this. Provide the sermons that you preach. If you'll do that and just fall short of saying, and I endorse candidate so-and-so. Now you could do that. Our lawyers are saying they're looking for the case to take to the Supreme Court because the Johnson Amendment is really fragile. There was never a deal in the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, that silence and muzzles your opinion in the pulpit. Nevertheless, you don't have to be the test case for that, but you can go right to that line, Dave. And because of fear, pastors are avoiding this. And what's happening is the people want to know. By the way, do you want to know how come Dan Bongino and Bannon and Charlie? You want to know why there's an explosion in conservative social media that is just like millions of people? You can go look at it. You can go on Getter, you can go on Twitter, you can go X, you can go on Facebook, and you'll see the audiences these guys. You know why? They came out of nowhere addressing the subjects that pastors won't talk about. Mm-hmm. And they're Catholic, and they have a basic, rudimentary biblical worldview. They're not really good evangelical scholars. Pisovic, Bannon, I work with them. I know what I'm talking about. Or they're young Christians. And the reality is, that's your audience. But you're not feeding it because you're afraid of the subjects. And that's a fear, and it's an assumption. You don't have to be afraid of it.
Wow, that's really good.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, this is so exciting, and what we're going to have available for all of you right below as you're reading this, we'll have all the links to the Courage Tour. Mm-hmm. And I also appreciate Andrew. He is a man of courage.
He really is.
He stands up.
It's amazing.
And it's voices like Andrew's, voices like yours, Dr. Lance, that really inspire us. So on the link, you'll see the Courage Tour. I'm also going to include your website, because people can go back. If you don't know Dr. Lance, you need to get to know him and his content and his materials, because it's a very inspirational platform that he has that will help you. And then you can also find him on X, formerly Twitter, and Facebook, of course, all those. But we're going to put all those links down in there, Dr. Lance. And I really appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then coming up pretty soon, in the next couple weeks, we have Pastor Grant Thigpen out of Naples, Florida, a real father in the faith. And he's going to be sharing with all the Army members about how to develop a ministry program within your church to equip people for ministry. And it's a great program. I've been to his church. I've spoken about this. You're going to have more information about it. But we're just really excited that you joined us today. Thank you so much. And thank you, Karen, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Lance.
Always inspired to be with you guys.